Welcome to Geek Culture Online. I'm your host, Patrick Bolin. This is movie night. So I thought it'd be very unique and interesting to actually show um, one of the earliest versions of a horror film that survived in film today. And that would be the film that was made in 1910, the Edison Frankenstein. Now, what's unique about this is there's a whole bunch of unique things about this. Let's first of all give some interesting information about it. Mary Fuller plays Elizabeth, Dr. Frankenstein's wife. Charles Staton Ogle, or Charles Ogle, as I think everybody knows him by, plays the monster. And August Phillips plays Dr. Frankenstein, and this, as far as I know, that was his first. This is his first movie role. Now, this film was considered lost for decades and decades and decades, and it was discovered in a private collection in the 50s, and it took a very long time to get it. I don't want to say get it out of his hands, but it was in a private collection from Alois, Alois, Alois Deltloff, Dett Laff, Laff. So he didn't want to give it up, and it was in poor condition to begin with, and it was stored improperly, and so it slowly deteriorated. Finally, they were able to get it. They purchased it with all the other films that was in his collection, and it went through several different restorations. Like the Film Society of the University of Geneva restored a version of it. The one that we're going to be looking at is from the Library of Congress, which you're able to go online as well. And this version is from 2018, which is kind of an interesting. I don't know the backstory about why it took so long to finally get into the Library of Congress. Because of the age, it's older than 1922. It's fallen into public domain, so nobody can actually yell at me for publicly presenting this, and I'm also giving credit to where it's from. So, without any further to do, let's watch this, and then we'll discuss the film afterwards. It's since it is a silent film, and back then the length of a movie or the length of anything that was presented was determined by the length of the reels of film, because the movie cameras could only hold so many feet of film in it, and that was called a single reel. I really thought that the original version of this, wow, I thought the original version of this was almost half an hour long, but apparently it was only 15 minutes long, and this restored version is a little over 12. So there's a few things still missing from it, and hopefully in time somebody will discover other stored copies of this and we'll be able to full version. So without any more further to do, I will show this. Here we go.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Well, that was interesting. Now,
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.
I fall for that every time. All right. Well, now we've viewed it, I'd like to do is kind of go back over it and kind of dissect it because there was a lot of interesting things in here that I think are completely overlooked. Oh, and by the way, I see it says movie night here. Um, all right. So let me go back here, and we're gonna kind of like uh, dissect this a little more. And let's see.
From the Library of
Okay,
Congress in Washington, D.C.
we can move that part and go right to the film.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
And this. And now, I jumped right into the film, which is kind of weird. And they don't really introduce these characters. And like I said earlier, is that we're missing about 2 minutes of the film, so that may be at the beginning where they introduce everybody else. But what's really interesting here is that there we go. And well, now I'm being hold on, timeout. Okay, I'm going to turn down the film a wee bit because apparently people weren't able to hear me. Now, is that better? Can people hear me over the film? Okay. What I'm going to do is completely turn off
From the Library of
sound
Congress
the
in
film.
Washington, D.C.
Oops. And just have the film going. Oops, darn it. Now, there we go. I'm going to go back to my, I can annotate onto the screen, which is really cool. And let's do it this way and that way. Now, what's really interesting is that, like I was saying, is that nobody introduced these characters at the beginning. So I think this is the missing part of the film. And then they kind of like jump right into his college. They skip all his college years and go right to this part here. And if this is a college dorm, I want to live here. But also, look, he's got a human head, all these skulls all over the place. And there's a lot of images of birds. So what are they kind of showing, talking here? Is like these are his failed experiments, and what's up with the birds? They're like all over the place, which is kind of scary. Um, and then he writes this big long thing, and then he just drops it on the ground. So I find it's just like, oh, if that was like the aha moment, that what was going on there, and then he like runs from the laboratory and goes to his dorm quarters. I mean, it's just this, just and look at all this other stuff. There's another skull here. There's a death mask on the wall. I mean, for a scientist, he's like really got this thing about all this dead equipment. And then he writes this really weird note. Okay. And it's just, and then um, he never calls Elizabeth by her name. It's sweetheart. She's not introduced or anything. He writes this real long, like almost confession. And and you think he'd send it. No, he wads it up and throws it on the ground. and then stomps off back to the laboratory. He doesn't exit by the door. He kind of goes exit stage right, which is, there was a door behind him. And then, okay, and look, here's a full skeleton with weird ribs. So, and there's another skull, and then there's the bird from earlier. And I'm going like, why is this like the prototypes? These are the failed experiments. Then it's a chemical bath, and then okay, he seals it and then bolts the door. So was that skeleton like a failed first attempt, and then the thing was so violent he realized that he's going to have to lock everything up before he's able to like succeed, air quotes. And unlike everything else we know about every Frankenstein film out there, this is made chemically. So did he discover like DNA? Is this like a clone? What's going on here? And it's a soup, it's just a sealed lab almost. It can't be airtight, um, but again,
Primordial soup.
exactly. And so it's just he seals everything off. So if this fails again, he's not going to get attacked by it. Yeah, it's a very primordial soup type of thing. So it's just, this is implying so many things on so many levels here. And he doesn't really seem to be surprised that it's working compared to that weird skeleton that's sitting in a chair. I mean, okay, here's a scientist like he scatters his labs with his failed attempts.
Oh, plus also, he keeps on looking through that slot, right? Earlier, they had glass in the windows, so why wouldn't he have glass there? So he could just continuously watch it rather than peek.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. And it just there's all these windows, like, yes, everything. There's windows in his other part of his lab. There's all these giant glass windows everywhere he goes. The only two places there isn't, up and look again, failed experiment, kicks in, it breaks the bar, and he skedaddles going through the door finally. And the only two places where you don't see a lot of windows is here, his bedroom, and the lab. There's that one big window on the other side of the lab that was where he wrote the note out before he comes over here and writes another note. He does a lot of writing. And then the astonishing thing about the creature is that it knew how to walk immediately. It recognized everything. It recognized the door and all this stuff. He recognized to follow him to here, and he's confronting him. And then when he realizes that he's going to be caught, he's actually talking to Dr. Frankenstein. And then when he hears somebody coming, he ditches. So this thing right out of the door is insanely intelligent and recognizes everything. It takes, several years to be able to figure out how to walk, talk, and recognize its environment. Boom, this thing right out of the gate knows it. So he succeeded, even though it's not the perfect human that he wanted. And right, like you said, here's all these windows. So the only time that he has windows is kind of when he's not
The dark character. He's in the light now.
Yes, when he's not the mad scientist, he's exposed to the world. And none of these people are, there's Elizabeth, who is given credit in the credits itself, but her father and the other guy are never mentioned. Again, this may be the missing 2 minutes. And okay, so he skedaddles out, comes back. Who knows how far away college was, the university, and he doesn't seem to be worried at all that he ran away from this thing. And here, instead of windows, which are partially covered up, um, like you see in the back there, there's a tiny window, but instead of windows, there's a giant mirror reflecting everything that's going on around here. And so it's kind of giving a Alice in the Looking Glass type of thing. It's an alternate view to what's going on. Again, now the creature's got clothes. So again, he if you just, if he realizes how this thing is walking, talking, able to clothe themselves, able to speak, communicate, and all this stuff, and he doesn't realize how much of a success this thing was. And he still knows how to hide. He doesn't, apparently he has not seen himself, but he knows he can't be seen.
Oh, and, although like a 2-year-old, his feet are hanging out of the curtain.
And who has a curtain near a fireplace? But again, you see the mirror, which is kind of showing what else is going on. And now, okay, now they're arguing again. And he sees himself finally. So all this time that he tracked down Dr. Frankenstein, he didn't see his reflection like in streams or in other windows or anything like that. So he skedaddles. He knows how to use doorknobs too, which is, and then, okay, we're back to he's ignoring this creature that invaded his house, and he goes ahead and goes to hell or high water. He's having his wedding. And then those two elderly people, you don't see them here. It's like the father and that other dude, you don't see them again. There's a plot hole. And don't you, and just, and he doesn't seem to be worried that this thing knows where he lives. Again, the big wide windows. So here he's happy, so he's exposed to the world. And because this is a restored print, this is slightly discolored, but you don't realize until he starts doing this, blowing out the candles, that the candles were on. And this is not an intentional color change. This is a restored print. So you got to keep in mind that everything should be the same black and white. And it's like, oh, I thought I closed the door. So now all his skeletons in the closet are exposed, so to speak.
Here, have a candelabra to hit me with.
So he goes chasing after it. So they chase him around themselves around the property. Apparently, come back in another door, and then come back to this room instead of going. It's weird.
Oh, this is supposed to be a big residence, though. So they're
Castle.
Trying to show size by having the different rooms moving between them.
And it is an amazing special effects for 1910. And then is this, where the doctor finally sees the evilness inside of himself, so love destroys it? Apparently not from the audience member here. So now she comes back. He doesn't even mention, does he say that, we don't know the dialogue or anything, but is did he say that he's gone for good? Now, the restored music was done by this guy, but in the actual pamphlet that was handed out, actually explained to the person that's supposed to be playing the music what pieces of music to play at what part. Charles Ogle, the monster, he did the makeup for this, and he lived all the way up in the 1940s, and so he appeared in multiple other films up till then. He didn't really retire. He kept on going until he couldn't anymore. So it's interesting to chase him down in some of his other works. Now, there you go. We've seen the film and we dissected it. Now it's very interesting that this was technically the only. Well, everybody keeps saying it's the first horror film. Uh, I I would like to amend that to saying it's the first horror film that survived. And I have a critic over there. Uh, so anyway, so because all 80% of all silent films have been lost to the sands of time through fire, through wars, because um, a lot of the films in Europe were melted down for the silver and for the acetate to make, of all things, sniper scopes, things like this. So out of the 80% that was lost, and this one was thought to be lost, like I said at the beginning of the broadcast, uh, and they only had one picture of this the whole entire time until it was discovered and restored. So just thinking of all the films that may have been, and this being the first one that we know that survived, I think it's remarkable because it had to take an extremely thick book, which started, the book starts when Dr. Frankenstein was a young kid and goes all the way up until his I think, early 30s when he created the monster. And so and the limitations of the reels of film, and they managed to, again, pluck significant parts of the original story and did something with it. Um, Again, like I said at the beginning of the broadcast, this was Dr. Frankenstein's first movie role. So um, I think, since it was silent and everything, and everybody always had to do it over the top because they're having to talk to the back row, he, for his first thing ever out of the gate, he did pretty well. Um, and this was done in Brooklyn, New York, of all places, because Edison films were filmed all in New York. And the reason, here's a little tidbit of fact, the reason why Hollywood became the big thing is that Edison at the time had a stranglehold or a monopoly on filmmaking. And so when all these Germans and other immigrants came over and started making their own films, they clashed a lot. And so they went, enough of this. We're going to go somewhere else in the country and make films. And they landed on California because highly depended on outdoor lighting. All the sets had no roofs. So they completely, utterly depended on the outdoor, and California got very little rain. So they went, we're on the other side of the country. Edison can't touch us. Then by 19, if I remember my facts, Edison shut down his movie division in 1990, and Hollywood grew from there. So we have the Hollywood and the movie industry to thank from Edison wanting to try to control it. But anyway, there we go. There's the first movie night. Um, and my critics keep yelling. Well, in any case, I felt that for a too real film, because of the length of of the film and a movie camera, it was they did a pretty good job, especially with the special effects, which at the time they were competing with things like The Lost World and things like that. I don't think Journey to the Moon had come out yet. So for experimenting with special effects, they really did a good job with it. What about you know, what did you think?
You know, um, at the time, people, well, they basically what they were doing was filming the theater, is what it comes down to. So consequently, the actors acted like if they were in a theater versus, um,
That was the
and the sets were also made that way.
mhm. They were it was very camera movement hadn't come about yet, so everything was still stationary, which kind of helped with special effects. Um, Now, how you're thinking like, well, they didn't do a digital
Oh, go
printer.
on, Cracker.
Yeah, apparently. She also has, but how they got the special effects to work is that they underexposed it, um, ran the scene, then backed the film up. Well, no, they also covered up um, half of the lens of the camera. So they basically did something like, where they um, took and, and blocked half the film, had the monster walk in and act to the mirror. They backed up the film, still underexposed, and then blocked the other side of the lens and had him act the same way to the mirror. And so when it was run at full speed, it looked like he disappeared, but it just that the part that was being blocked in front of the mirror was a shorter amount of time, so that's why it looked like he just disappeared off of there, and he was still there when Dr. Frankenstein came in, because that part was the longer exposure. So whoever figured that out was brilliant, especially for the time period. And yes, it was they were talking to a theater audience because it was actually shown in theaters um, like that, because that was the place where live music was available. So it was quite interesting what they were able to do with so little. Um,
At the time they hadn't developed acting for film.
well,
It was, they didn't think of possibly doing it differently,
well,
and it took a while
well,
for people to realize that.
well,
In fact, I don't think it really happened until around the 30s, where people started acting for
I,
theater.
I think it was well, I think it has a lot to do with whoever the director was, because a lot of these people had no the people that were directing these films, a ton of them had no theatrical or movie experience whatsoever. So therefore, when they did stuff, they were like, okay, well, like this was filmed in 4 days flat. So they knew that they had so many links, so much footage and so much time to get it in and out. So it's just I think later on, such as like Charlie Chaplin, who directed a lot of his own, most of his own, knew what to do with the camera. Things like Harold Lloyd and oh, Lon Chaney and Phantom, the Hunchback of Notre
Buster,
Dame. That was
Buster Keaton.
1925. Buster Keaton. The Lost World, which was one of the first ones that they actually did stop motion animation. So it just, I think it really depended on the person behind the camera, which affected things a great deal. If you look at some of Edison's early works, um, they were even more wooden because they were experimenting. One of his early films was nothing but something like it was all cubism. They tried to make a cubism painting come to life, and it wasn't really much to it. And I think that was like 8 minutes long, and it just you go back and watch that, and you're like, wow, just so yeah. And again, it's um, people saw what can be done, and then they built off of it. So the better directors, people learned from, and but this dude, um, hmm, let's see here. I'm able to. I forget the director's name. It always escapes me. One moment. I don't think he did much else. Boom. Let's see here. Of course. Boom. And but while I'm looking this up, I think that it was for what it was. They did a pretty good job with it. Um, it's a shame that a good chunk of it. Well, I didn't say a good chunk. There's several minutes missing from it. And I'd like to see what is missing. But and for whatever reason, IMDb is giving me fits. So let's go to Wikipedia and let's see here. Oh, of course, they list the cast, but they don't list the director. Any hooligans. Um, oh, here, let me show you this. Now they even knew back then publicity shots. So here's a picture of the whole entire set. Um, so there's the lab on the left side, and all that other lab equipment is missing from this shot. Then over on the right side, there he is. And the darn head is still sitting on the table. And so you can see how they were able to take this huge set and make two sets out of it, because of the way that they, split it up and focused in on there. And then there's my favorite. Let's see here. Let's go here. And shows you the presence of Charles Ogle. He had been around for a lot longer. He had been doing stage work way before Frankenstein. And here's a different angle of the same set. And for somebody who did his own makeup, that's pretty darn good. And the precursor to the flat or the high forehead of the Frankenstein we know of with Boris Karloff, it's right here. High forehead type of head. So here it is 22 years before the Universal Frankenstein, and that is already being explored as part of the monster's makeup.
Well, I mean, it helps signify the idea of the monster having a brain that's not quite right. you know, by having the shape of the skull wrong.
True, 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 true. So I've always, I've always wanted to see this film, and when I discovered it several years ago, I'm so glad that it's now public domain. Everybody can enjoy it. So yeah, the deformity of the creature, I, if, in any iteration of this, even the stage production emphasized that. So that was pretty cool that that was pointed out. All right. Well, in any case, there we go. First movie night. Yay! Jazz hands. Um, and so hope to have more of these. And hope to be able to um, have a larger crowd. That would help, and less of a critic.
I didn't find out about it until when I got on.
Ah,
I've been doing things all day.
yeah. Well, no problem.
I didn't even go on Facebook until just.
Uh, critic. Anyway, any hooligans. Well, again, I want to thank everybody. This is going to be available on the YouTube channel for anybody who wants to go back and rewatch the film and dissect it. No, don't forget the Library of Congress not only has this, but thousands of films that they've deemed worthy. And they're adding 100 films a year. Wow. And anyway, I want everybody to thank you for watching, and go to my Patreon, patreon.com/GeekCultureOnline. Contribute there. Go to the YouTube channel, subscribe, rate, and review. And I'll see you next time. All right. Thanks for joining. Good night.